Hello and welcome to another podcast video from Gun Gamers. I'm Eric, and I, in this video, hopped on with Lane, the BB Warrior, to do a live stream and interact with some of our members of our community and talk a lot about, what people expect out of Airsoft games, what different Airsoft games do well, and what the different game design philosophies of Airsoft promoters and the different game priority philosophies of Airsoft game players is. So hopefully you find this as interesting as we did, because it really was a heck of a discussion. Enjoy the show.
So I think 2015, I feel like late 2015 was when we played together for the first time at River City, maybe.
The main one I remember, which will be helpful for today's video, is I went to my first American Milsim with you in November of 2016. I remember because it was days before the election, and going from the Northeast to the South, little bit different opinions on what was going to be happening in the next couple of days. So that's the main one that I remember, but I don't know if we met the fall before that or the spring before that, but it was at a local field through different types of Airsoft games than your traditional open plays. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is finding, the specific event that you really enjoy.
Well, and this kind of comes from, I feel like a lot of Airsofters now are very spoiled for choice, right? There's so many games now. There's local games of more types and varieties than have ever existed. There's large, rented out facility, what a lot of us have started to kind of call national games because they draw nationally. There's those types of events now that more and more of those exist. There's more regional level promoters who stick around a lot of regions and draw a lot of a strong community of players based around the same place. It's kind of where Gun Gamers Productions is starting to fall right now. And I feel like that is so cool, but it also means that a lot of players are going to a lot of these games and they have a lot of expectations of how things are going to go based on their experiences with Airsoft so far.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a podcast idea in and of itself, is the amount of variety and choice, not just in games, but in everything in Airsoft, is so much more than 10 years ago. But I feel like because there are so many different event promoters who have different styles of games, and what you're going to get is going to be different depending on who you go to. There's been instances where myself, I've gone to games expecting something. It's not what I thought it was going to be. And I feel like a lot of players can also fall into that same issue where there's a certain style of gameplay that you're looking for. And, these events are more expensive than your typical day of Airsoft. When you're paying over $100 to go to a game, you want to enjoy yourself, to say the least. So finding that game can sometimes be trial and error. And hopefully by talking about some of the different regional and national games we've gone to today, that can help you on your journey to find the Airsoft game that's right for you and go to one that actually is something that you'll enjoy.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that, I've observed, as we've been going more and more, and, I've always been trying to talk to people who actually work in the industry just to keep track of what's going on and, how players are doing and what companies are doing and what games are happening. And one of the things I've observed that's a very industry standard, agreed upon stat, is that most Airsoft players only play for about 2 years.
Absolutely.
And I think a big part of why is because I think a lot of players get to a point in the game where they get bored and they don't find the thing that's going to keep them engaged and keep them coming back and keep them wanting to play. They go to their local field a few times and use the same few guns with the same handful of players playing the same handful of game modes. And eventually it just becomes, oh, well, I'm bored. I feel like I've done all I can do with this hobby without spending a ton of money when I don't necessarily know what kind of games I'm going to like. And I think a lot of that falls to the industry for failing to differentiate genres. We're still seeing people talk about Milsim versus Speedsoft as if there aren't genres upon themselves within the ends of those.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, that was the same thing that I fell into. Maybe 6 years into Airsoft. Unfortunately, in upstate New York, there's just not a lot of fields, so you can easily fall into that trap of you just get bored. And around the time that I met you is when I started exploring different fields, and kind of finding more of what I was looking for out of Airsoft to make the hobby more enjoyable. But, now because there are so many different event promoters, it is no longer Milsim versus Speedsoft because there's so much not only within those two categories, but the middle. There's so many different options to find what you like. And it's okay to say, I like this over that. Like, there are games I enjoy a lot more than others, and that's totally fine. However, you enjoy the hobby is up to you, but it can sometimes take a little bit to find exactly what it is that you enjoy about the hobby and finding an event promoter that fosters that sort of environment.
Another thing that I think people can fall into is expecting everyone else to enjoy the same things about the hobby. And this is something that I notice when we get players who go to games that are labeled as like milsim games, but then they bring in to every milsim game exactly how the other promoters do milsim.
Yeah.
And then they start to expect that type of experience at every game that uses the word milsim, which is actually a huge part of why I never want to use the term milsim for Gun Gamers Productions, because I don't want to fall into other people's expectations of other games. But actually, we have a 6mm Mandalorian in the chat who's a great example of something I want to talk about. Is I think a lot of games need to stop using the same handful of terms to describe themselves. I think a good first step, not just for players, but also for event hosts and event promoters, is going to be acknowledging that your games are different and acknowledging that different doesn't mean worse.
Yeah, like absolutely. I would say that the overuse of the term milsim is a huge issue because it's just becoming a term that when people say milsim, what they mean is big airsoft game. But if everybody uses the same term and everybody has a slightly different or a totally out there game, it eventually loses the value and the meaning of the word. And as a business, you'd think that you want the things that make you different from your competitors to stand out. But if we're using the exact same terms to describe everything from I've seen like a more structured open play called a milsim. You have Milsim West, where it's literally in the business name, and everything in between's been called milsim. But if we're calling every experience in Airsoft the exact same word, then it's harder for players to find what they like, and it's harder for promoters to distinguish themselves from others to attract that player to their specific type of Airsoft.
Yeah. And that's a big thing that I also think is, I think the dichotomy of Speedsoft versus Milsim, and I also apologize, by the way. We had the Speed Sim series for a long time, which I'm very proud of and was a very good series, and I remember very fondly. But one of the things that I think I fell into for a lot of it is I talked about everything that wasn't Speedsoft as if it was Milsim. Mm-hmm. And that's how a lot of Airsoft players fall into, is they think everything that's not bright color, dye mask, high kappa, oh, well, I'm a milsim player. It's like, okay, but like that could mean any number of different things. And I think what's cool to see that we're starting to see is some more innovation outside of just trying to out milsim each other, because I'm going to expose my biases here, but I literally like work with Milsim West. And to my mind, they are as hardcore as Milsim is going to get. Like everything that is not that level of involved is like, okay, that to me is not as hardcore as Milsim gets. Like Milsim West is hardcore, but not everyone wants that.
Absolutely. Like for me, with Milsim West as the example, I think Milsim West is more on the simulation side than the Airsoft side. Like this is might be an unpopular opinion. I don't think the actual Airsoft at Milsim West, like the actual shooting and engagements, is as fun as other event promoters. What I love about Milsim West, and the reason that Josh keeps getting my $200 every couple of months, is everything else. There's just so many experiences in Milsim West that I won't get anywhere else. We just don't happen to be using Airsoft guns. But I think what makes Milsim West unique is a lot of the other simulation. It's the movements. It's the stuff you don't get anywhere else.
The command structure, the chain of supply, all that type of stuff.
And if I want my fill of just like, playing Airsoft and having a lot of people, I think there's other more affordable, frankly, ways to do that. But it really comes down to like what I want out of the day. And it's okay to want to go to different styles of events and be like, there's some days where I just want to go and get some action, even if it means there's no movement and I'm just going from spawn straight to the fight at an open play. That's cool. If I want to, put 40 pounds on my back and go sleep in the woods with my friends, I'm going to go to Milsim West instead. But it really just comes down to figuring out what you want out of Airsoft. And it's okay to want different things on different days. But again, that just leads to finding the right events that foster what you want to find.
Yeah. And one of the things that I also think is important to mention is we've talked a lot about, the Milsim side of things, but then actually it's Leafs fan. Oh God. Okay. I don't care that you made a joke about Speedsoft versus Milsim. I care that you're a Leafs fan, and that means you're Canadian. So that is a joke. But I actually really like his point as well, Speedsoft is greater than Fake Sim, obviously, being sarcastic about because Milsim's not the real thing. No. It will never be. But a lot of players want the Speedsoft thing, and players aren't wrong for wanting that.
And it's super fun. While I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic that gets associated with Speedsoft, if a good indoor field, which is very rare, I hate to say, but a good indoor field is amazing. I miss, I think it was Plains Airsoft Arena was the name, over by Scranton. It was an it was an indoor field built like an outdoor field, which is probably why I liked it. That was the most fun I have ever had in just an Airsoft sense. Again, even though I don't like the aesthetic that's associated with Speedsoft, the gameplay itself and the rules around Speedsoft are incredibly fun.
Hot take. Speedsoft has done a better job of understanding Airsoft as a gaming system than many Milsim promoters.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I'm very interested in, because even as I'm crafting the Gun Gamers Productions games, I look at tabletop game design. I look at video game design. I'm drawing inspiration from all kinds of different sources. And one of the things that you realize is that part of the reason Speedsoft appeals to people so well is because it distills down exactly what they're looking for out of Airsoft. They want intense rounds with, a million little different strategies that can all be done differently, but it's over quickly. And it's almost like a comparison I would make with video games is the difference between Arma 3 and Call of Duty. Because with high level Call of Duty play, you get into all the different strategies of the meta, understanding the map, and balancing who's playing what objectives, knowing what people are good at, and that's what people are looking for. And what do I think about mag dumps? I mean, what do you think? They're cringe. It's just cringe. I don't think the whole mag dump thing is. I don't know. I think people use it as a weird way to get clout. I mag dumped somebody. It's man, I've been playing Airsoft for so long. I've mag dumped so many of my friends just by accident.
I feel like something that we haven't quite discussed yet, because I don't think that you or I really fall into it. There's a lot of players who get into Airsoft with the mentality of it's a competition, and there's certain events that do that better than others. I personally think that Speedsoft, by being on a smaller scale as opposed to a large scale Airsoft game that's outside, I think they're better suited for that, because Airsoft as a game is really hard to catch cheating, and Airsoft's an honor system. Paintball, I think, works so well in this sense because there's a visual indicator. There's still ways to cheat. I mean, you can wipe away the paint, but it's a little bit more noticeable. So I feel like Speedsoft's better as a game for those people that just want to win. And sometimes, at least in my opinion, it's not the games that I personally enjoy. People take that I need to win mentality to games where there is no winner. There's just you're just there to have fun. It's not necessarily a competition. There's events that are better and kind of geared towards that, but there's also events that are not geared towards that whatsoever. And like you said, it can be an issue where you take the mentality of one event promoter and bring it to the other, and they don't mesh super well.
Yeah, and that's something I think is important to understand, is the intention of the game design of different promoters. Because I do think every promoter to some level is engaging in game design, because you're putting people through a game to play. Now, whether that game is more similar to Rainbow Six Siege or Dungeons and Dragons That's where the things change. And I think people need to understand the difference between sandbox style airsoft games and immersive style airsoft games. Forget Milsim versus Speedsoft. I think that's the real dichotomy that divides airsoft is, some people will go to a game that's a big open play on a big field, and that's exactly what they're looking for. They want to bring their group out, play with their cool toys, play with their cool guns, play with their group, and see what they can do in the context of being in a squad size element within that situation. Other people, nerds like me, want to go out and feel like they're immersed in a scenario. And basically, it's a LARP. Like now your system of priorities has shifted. Like no longer are you just looking for the most entertainment value out of airsoft gun battles. Now you're looking for airsoft gun battles being part of an overall larger gaming experience. And it's different.
Absolutely. I think part of what would be really beneficial is if you're looking to get into other styles of airsoft, you really need to realize that we're just a bunch of nerds in the woods. Like getting over the hurdle of oh, well, that's dorky or that's nerdy to be LARPing with my toy guns. You're already dressed up as a soldier if you're outside. Like you're LARPing already. Just own up to it and and lean into it because, well, that wasn't something that I really enjoyed getting into airsoft, but as I've done it more, it's really fun. It's really fun to just not think about the real world for 40 hours if you're an insurgency game and just sell soda in a war-torn country or for the Survive Omega games, pretend that it's the end of the world. And I feel like with those games that try to incorporate those things, whether it's Omega, Milsim West, the Star Wars game, by leaning into it, I feel like you start to understand some of or at least understand the rationale behind some of the game decisions and kind of the rule set around it. And you're not just treating it as an ordinary airsoft game, and that makes it more rewarding and more enjoyable as a player.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is that comes with also going to the types of games that encourage that. I mean, for example, a game that I like to go to play is American Milsim games. Mm-hmm. American Milsim is not as much about the LARP. American Milsim is about going out, playing with your friends, with a ton of people in a scenario where you are kind of left to your own devices to try to ad hoc coordinate with the chain of command. Depending on who you've got is going to kind of change how that works, but it's pure sandbox. I like scenario games personally, but I also like sandbox. But you have to know what you're getting into. And I think a lot of people go into scenario games expecting a sandbox game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they have a bad time. Or people go into sandbox games expecting a scenario game. And then they have a bad time. And that's where I think promoters, like I said, I think promoters need to do a better job of being open about their design intention. Like, for example, for my games, right? For Gun Gamers Productions, I'm trying to build a combat sandbox that works within the framework of scenarios. So it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B, right? Like I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. Yeah. But my goal is that players determine the outcome of scenarios, and then the scenario evolves based on that, based on what they did within the tools they were given with the rule set. And I think one thing that airsofters struggle with, and this is maybe where, people who have some background in tabletop gaming have an easier time with it. Players look at rules as purely limitations. And one of the things that I've realized as I got into D&D and I've, been trying to convince myself to play some Warhammer, but God, that's a rabbit hole and a half. But you realize that rule sets aren't limitations, they're parameters. And as Orson Welles said, the death of art is the lack of limitation. And when you have parameters, that kind of tells you what kind of experience that promoter is going for.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard so many players see a rule set and see something they don't agree with, and they're like, "Oh, that sucks because I can't do this or I can't do that," and they're limiting me. But rules really create an experience. It's there. Some rules are there for safety. You have to wear your eye protection so you don't get your eye shot out. But there's other rules that are trying to build an experience in the game, and that could be balancing. Like if riflemen are semi-automatic and light machine guns are full auto, that's balancing to reward somebody for carrying the bigger, heavier gun. But then there's also things that will play into the scenario, play into the LARP. And if you don't get that, I could see how you could get frustrated by those types of games very easily.
Yeah. And I think that's the big thing with, what we're talking about is understand what kind of experience promoters are putting on, but then within that, understand what kind of experience you're looking for out of a game. Because I think, people just need to understand what they're doing. And that's where I think Airsoft needs more genres. And I do think that promoters, like I'm just gonna name drop some promoters here real quick. Survive Omega, Balahack just as a field.
Yeah.
6mm Mandalorian and the Galactic Civil War series, and even like the sci-fi focused like Grimnir tactical games. I think a lot of those are kind of ahead of the curve of what we're gonna see with Airsoft's evolution. And this is something I'm excited about. I want more. Again, have my cake and eat it too, right? I love milsim games. I love wearing my keg kit or my Russian kit and going to whatever games and like playing the soldier role.
Yeah.
But I also am a huge nerd. And I love games that give me the opportunity to be a post-apocalyptic warlord just bullying people until they come kill me.
Absolutely. I love Milsim West because the game makes me feel like I am a nobody. I am the infantryman running into the fire and falling on the ground. I love Omega because I'm the post-apocalyptic mailman who's getting murdered by Eric. So I feel like it can go either way, and it's kind of one of those things that unfortunately you just kind of have to try them and see what you like and what you don't. And I think that's really unfortunate for the majority of players who like we have the advantage of doing this for a combined like 30 years at this point.
Yeah.
We have context, but for those players that only stay in for a year or two, they might spend $100 at a game, not like it for whatever reason, and that could be the thing that gets them out of the hobby, which is really unfortunate. But it really, I think a lot of that could be avoided by people not calling every big Airsoft game a milsim and being very much, we're LARPing with Airsoft guns. I think that would not only bring in people who don't traditionally play Airsoft, which we experienced a lot at Survive Omega. There's a lot of people who are like, I've never played Airsoft before. I don't know how this thing in my hand works. Awesome. We need more people in Airsoft. We need to keep bringing new people into the hobby with these new ideas to expand what we can do with Airsoft. But I think it really can just like, if we're not defining what makes the game unique, not only as a business are you going to have unhappy customers, but it's also going to limit what people do with the hobby and having them try of other event promoters to see what they ultimately like.
Well, and that's where, God, I've got a hot take here. So that's where I get a little iffy when people call Airsoft a sport, because to me, let me explain myself. I don't care. Like, I'm not one of those people who's gonna troll you and be like, "Hey, like you think Airsoft is a sport, you jerk." but for me, from like a technical definition standpoint, I think Airsoft is one umbrella term for any number of other games and systems that can be done with it.
Yeah.
And there is no one monolithic game or sport of Airsoft, because everybody's just using Airsoft guns to craft the kind of games they want to play. And that to me is the incredible gift that Airsoft represents, is that you just get to go outside and touch grass while playing video games in real life.
Like Eric and I are friends because we have a lot of similar opinions. And Airsoft not being a sport is one. I think the reason why I don't consider Airsoft to be a sport is because the only thing that defines what Airsoft is, whether it's Milsim West, whether it's Omega, whether it's Tarkov, whatever, the Galactic Civil War, the only thing connecting all of those together is the fact that you're holding an Airsoft gun. If I was doing something completely different than American football while still having a football, I would not call it football. So that's why I don't think that Airsoft is a sport, because it can be so many different things. And with those different things, there are different guidelines, different ways that you should handle it, different rules. So that's why I don't think that Airsoft's a sport. But I think that that's a blessing that we're not limited into one specific way to play airsoft, that there's so many unique ways to enjoy these toy replicas and have just so many different experiences with them.
But that requires, and this is something that I've noticed has been like very prevalent, I think every airsoft scene wants to gatekeep airsoft. And they all think that their scene is the right way to do it.
Mhm.
So gatekeeping anything that's not their scene is correct for like the long-term growth of airsoft. But I don't think that could be more incorrect because airsoft is a small industry in the grand scheme of things. You know how many billion-dollar companies exist in airsoft?
One.
Basically,
Yes.
yes.
E-bike.
Yeah. I mean, Evic is probably the only retailer in airsoft that is a major force. Other than that, most of these factories are literally owned by like a family.
Yeah.
And, there's the same few factories that make everything. So players think that, oh, well, my Milsim, my Speedsoft, my favorite event promoter scene is the scene that should be like how airsoft grows into. But the reality is you are this big of how the sales go, because airsoft does not survive without all the other people who are playing the ways you don't like.
Exactly. Like the only I apologize, I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, like the way that you do things on the field is not the way that other people like to do things. But hear me out. You don't have to play airsoft just one way. As we've spent the last however long talking about, we love Milsim West, where you're the dude in the trenches, but then we're also running around in the post-apocalypse with like 5 BBs to our name. It's okay to like different ways, and that is an issue with gatekeeping. And I feel like in airsoft you see it at so many different levels, whether it be just the type of way that you play, the places that you play. Like,
Yeah.
I've never understood fields that gatekeep their community, or like it's like, well, you need to know to get in. That probably means that you're doing it illegally, honestly. But like,
Well, that's how you know they're not running a real business.
yeah. If you don't want more people to go to your field, it probably means that you're in your mom's backyard. And if that's how you like to play airsoft, that's cool. I just think that there are many other ways to play that will probably be better for the hobby in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Going to an actual business that has a license and insurance.
Well, and that's the other thing that I think has been kind of limiting airsoft for a while is, and this is where economic reality comes in, right? Because airsoft is a niche scene, it has kind of hamstrung experimentation, because you have people who want to run these games and want to do these things, but then it's limited by, well, how many people can I get to show up? And can I do it in a way that makes sense while being legal? Because believe it or not, like, as weird as it sounds, just inviting people over to a piece of property that you happen to have permission to play on, if you accept any level of money for that to happen, you are technically operating a business and are technically open to all that liability. And all it takes is one guy to decide to sue you.
Yeah, and if you if you Google airsoft waiver and print it out, sorry, that's not going to save you. If somebody does something incredibly stupid and breaks their leg or gets their eye shot out, that's not going to save you.
Yeah, or
Waivers
falls
are not-
off a truck and smashes their head.
Yeah, like I think it's just unfortunate because airsoft is so small, and really the barrier of entry to host an airsoft event is that you own a piece of property.
Or
And-
you're able to rent one and then convince other people to
Yeah.
go to it.
Or you're the idiot who like does it at a state park, or like just a piece of woods that people don't actively travel through. The barrier entry is very low, and a lot of people get into airsoft event promoting because of that. But it can definitely leave you open to liability and cause a lot of issues down the road if you don't know what you're doing. And I say that as somebody who, when I turned 18, had no idea what I wanted to do in life, but I loved toy guns. So I opened an airsoft store, like an e-commerce website. And I had no idea what I was doing. What is sales tax? I have to pay that quarterly to the government. Why is the government taking
New
money from
York
me?
State lets us report sales tax yearly because, as it turns out, by New York State definition, even though I don't call airsoft a sport, by New York State definition, airsoft events are sporting events. And as it turns out, sporting events that you're participating in are not sales taxable. but the rentals
Yeah,
are sales tax.
everything else.
But that's the thing. You have to read tax code.
Yeah. The real funny thing is, as like an airsoft store, you sell BBs, airsoft guns, and uniforms. You know what New York has special rules on? Selling clothing.
Yep.
So I'm an example of, it's a real low barrier of entry to either just like take $10 in cash when somebody pulls up to your backyard to play airsoft, or to go to the county courthouse and pay $20 for a sole proprietorship. A lot of people get into airsoft, and I feel like that's also part of the issue of expanding the hobby. Is some people who get into the business of airsoft aren't quite prepared for that responsibility, and maybe haven't been in long enough to know how to do it successfully.
Yes, hi, it's me. But no, but seriously, but the point with that though is that there is a lot of hurdles to overcome to run an airsoft game. And the easiest way to shortcut that, if you're looking for it, is to work with a local field. A lot of local fields will let you run games basically under the table. Let's use the words. Let's use the right words. And they will put it under their insurance. They'll handle the sales tax and everything. And, you either basically just volunteer, or they'll pay you like a rate per head. That's pretty common in the airsoft industry, is that if you really want to run a game and you really have an idea you're attached to, approach your local field with it. That's how I got started.
Yeah. And I did that for a little bit as well. And I just want to make sure that we're clear. We're not discouraging people from getting into the business of airsoft, but there are easier ways to do it. And there's lessons that don't necessarily have to be learned by doing something like partnering with the local field to make it happen, because that's how I ran games. There was a field that just does open plays. And I was like, hey, how would you guys feel about a bigger event that doesn't necessarily require your reffing staff and worked under a different rule set? And some places are going to turn you down, just like any business opportunity in life. Some people aren't going to get it, or they're just not going to want to take on the risk of working with somebody else, but other fields will. And, like even in our neck of the woods, there are those people who have just kind of found their role in airsoft being the people who bring a little bit more structure to an average field.
Yeah. Well, and something else that I think is important though, but circling back, is knowing what kind of game you want to run. And this is where we talk about variety and genres. And I think players need to understand that there's different genres of game, and hosts need to understand that there's different genres of game and know what you're trying to host. But also try to communicate with players ahead of time what you're trying to host, because there's nothing worse. And I've had this experience at more than one game that I've hosted, like pre and post GGP, where somebody comes to your game and like puts the effort in, but it's just not for them.
Yeah.
And they just didn't get the idea that it wasn't going to be for them before the game. And that feels so bad, because like they're telling you all the things they didn't like about the game. And everything they're telling you, you're like, shit, that was what I was going for. And it might be the one guy out of 100 people you had at your game. Everybody else really liked the way it went. And something about that one guy's circumstances or his expectations or something is not. And I feel awful when that happens.
especially like when it's in person after you've been out like busting your ass for 12 hours in the hot sun, carrying 5-gallon water jugs so people don't die. I can't imagine what that feedback in person must be like while it's happening. But I think that really, like, again, to go back to the original point, if everybody stopped calling themselves Milsim, hopefully people would know what they're getting into when they buy their ticket.
Yeah, right. And I think that goes into marketing, right? And that's because, hold on real quick. I just want to do a chat stuff. So Alistair is from the UK. And also he asked if we're drinking anything good, because he is from Scotland. So we're not drinking scotch, but we are drinking a bottled in bond Old Pepper bourbon. I was just at the James Pepper Distillery. I actually need more bourbon. I'm almost out. Well. Yeah, there we go. So that's the fun thing too. But he says, running a field in the UK is complicated. I absolutely believe that.
I can't even imagine, because like America's government doesn't care as long as you pay your taxes. That's like the hurdle. for airsoft is they get their cut in a country where there's like any sort of regulation on airsoft guns besides just like have an orange tip. I cannot imagine what it must be like to deal with the government.
Well, the airsoft scene in the UK is almost older than the airsoft scene in the US. So there's also that level of like, you've got so many established players who have all been playing the same way for so long, or maybe they've evolved the way they play for so long. And now you're catering to that level of player base. So yeah, Alistair, like, man, commendations to you if you're running a field in the UK, man, because like, rock on. I don't know how you do it.
That sounds like a lot more than what it is in the US. And like, I hate to say it out loud. I feel like one of the hardest parts of owning an airsoft field and operating an airsoft field is players themselves. And then you have the government stuff on top of it. I bless your soul. You must have the patience of a saint.
But that does go down to, so we've talked a lot about knowing what's important. But I want to say, now we've talked about what players need to know. But how would we break down our experiences at a bunch of different... So first, for reference, if you can name a promoter in the United States that has ever hosted a game in the Northeast, odds are good I've been to it.
Yeah, between us, I think we've been to every event promoter that hosted a game to the east of the Mississippi. I don't think there's any that we're missing.
Theta events, I've never been.
Okay, I have never been either.
And Ballahack, never been to Ballahack. Need to fix that.
That's a shame.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who go to Ballahack.
We've been talking about going to Ballahack. I legitimately think for over 5 years at this point. Like I feel like every okay, we're gonna drive to go to American Milsim in Mississippi. That was what, 16 hours?
Yeah,
it was miserable. That's all I remember. And then like on the way back, we're like, man, Ballahack would be half the time. We should just do that. That was in 2016. Still have not been. So that is definitely on the to-do list.
Yeah. But how would we summarize? So I'm going to pick, you know what? Just of the Milsim event promoters, of what people call Milsim West, most hardcore Milsim, period. Yeah. Like, in my opinion. Other than that, I do think Emsato tries to curate more of a scenario. I think you have to go to games with a smaller player count to get the most out of it, personally.
Yeah.
Also, games that are at venues that will happen. There has been a rash of some of those getting canceled. I think Tom's been trying to fix that. I don't talk to Tom casually, so I don't know. AMS, I've never seen an AMS game get canceled unless like something horrible happened.
So they will out of their control.
Yeah, so they will always happen. But they are very, like, to my mind, AMS is as sandbox as like a Milsim game gets for the most part, because they do really leave it to the chain of command of each side for how organized their side is going to be. But the scenario that's set up, it's CPs throughout the field, occasional fragos. For the most part, it's very friendly for like, hey, I want to come and play with my cool toys on a cool facility with a bunch of people. That's kind of what they're going for. And I don't think that's a problem. I do think it's what they go for. But then they have like the fragos and the dams and stuff, where then players who want the scenarios can pay a little extra for a special ticket. And I know some people are pretty iffy on like paying for those experiences, to which I say, if you want that type of stuff, you don't get it at Milsim West.
No.
But if you want the scenario game, then yeah, you can go to Milsim West or Gun Games Productions, get more of like a scenario. But
I feel like a lot of, if we talk about large scale airsoft games, I feel like they fit on a scale between structure and freedom to kind of do what you want. And on the structure end, you have Milsim West, where it's very structured. You know who your platoon leader and your platoon sergeant are. Like you know who your cadre is when you get into it, versus on the other side where it's more freedom based, which I would say is more on the line of Lion Claws. You're given the sandbox in the cool environment and do what you want for 10 hours. And it's not, and wherever you fall on that sliding scale of what you want, totally okay. You like what you like, but it's important to recognize what you're getting into in that sense. And I feel like a good kind of middle ground, like if we're putting at Milsim West at completely structured and like Lion Claws at freedom, I feel like AMS is a good middle for those.
Yeah.
Because there's been some AMS games where I never know who my leadership is besides my squad leader. And let's be honest, at those games, that really doesn't matter.
Well, because it's built around a squad size experience for
Yeah.
the most part. And then, we've got like a little further toward the structure end, I think is where we try to live is GGP. But then we're more focused on like, okay, we're not a milsim, we're a combat sandbox. So then we're trying to have like the elements of you're immersed in the scenario, but then you also have all these tools within the parameters to figure out how you want to play the scenario. So the game design mentality of the promoter is always going to come into play. Like you will always know what their inspirations are. Like DFE, for example, I think is as far as you get for a big weekend game into the freedom realm. And realistically speaking, you don't have to have any chain of command at DFE. I did I led at Battle for Los Angeles 5, and the players who were on ERT with me obviously experienced like a little bit of, hey, here's the larger plan if you want to try to stick to it, and here's the missions I'm going to try to give you within that larger plan. But if players just wanted to go out and play big field capture the flag at Victorville with their buddies,
You can.
It wasn't like I was chasing them down and not giving them ammo for not obeying orders. Like, they're playing the game, man. Like, they're having fun.
Exactly. And it's been a couple of years since I've been to DFE. Do they still do it kind of like round based for it's only like 2 to 3 hours? I feel like that's also nice for them because let's say something doesn't work. Like the way they have the spawns laid out on the field or the objectives, whatever, is just more advantageous to one side. Well, it only lasts 2 hours. Then you reset and can fix those issues. And DFE has the app and everything, which makes it, I feel like, a lot easier to have that kind of sandbox where you really never need to talk to your commander because you can look at your phone and be like, oh, I need to go to A, like capture point A. And you don't need that command to kind of curate the experience for you. And I think that's one of the great things about having digital technology like that come into Airsoft. That's a whole different conversation. But I feel like DFE does the sandbox element of it really well. And I do want to talk about American Milsim for a moment, just because it was like one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in Airsoft, is those, they call them what, the dam missions?
Yeah, well, we got picked for one.
Yeah, we just got picked to help with one. Like
the group didn't show up.
Yeah, they like the people who paid didn't show up, and they're like, well, we just need bodies. And we're like, yeah, we'll do something cool. That was awesome. Like that provides structure to a game that is like that middle of the road structure. So I mean, if you want to pay extra to get a taste of that structure, I mean, you're already paying $150 to go to a game that you like. Why not pay that extra $50 if you want to see if you like something, rather than like, I feel like a lot of people, once you get towards that structure side of the spectrum, they get a little bit worried, a little bit anxious. They're like, well, what if I don't like it in this game? Like if you're buying a late Milsim West ticket, it can be like $300 depending on the AO, and you might not like it. I think that's a good taste to see if you like more structure, because it's not like a lot of
come to Gun Gamers Productions.
Yeah. Or get it in a 12-hour continuous experience at Gun Gamers Productions. I totally lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
With the shameless plug for for GunGamersProductions.com. But yeah, like I feel like a lot of players get kind of anxious about the more structured elements if you're trying to go from something that's a little bit more sandboxy, and I feel like it's harder to do the structure on a very small scale.
So here's how I can tell sometimes whether or not a player wants to get out of a more sandboxy type of game and get into more structured games. See how much they try to institute an ad hoc chain of command at an unstructured game. If they're at a DFE and they want to have like a squad leader position or report as a fire team leader or come up to the commander and like work on the plan, that's a player who likes, open play, casual sandbox games, but also wants that next level of engagement. that to me is the first sign that like this player's only ever done sandbox stuff, but is trying to put structure onto the sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And also, then you've got some players who, when some of them start out going to really structured games, but then they don't like, oh, I have to do this to get ammo. I have to report to this person. I have to give ace reports. Those people want less structure. Like, you always have to be looking at how players are engaging with the systems they've been given to tell what kind of experience they're trying to get out of those systems. And this is where I think players bear a lot of responsibility as well, is I do think some players will try to impose their expectations of what a game should be like on top of whatever systems they've been given, even if it doesn't work.
Yeah, I feel like you can really tell what somebody wants by the cues they give at a game. If you're at a less structured game and you're the one that goes up to the platoon leader or even above that, and you're like, where can I help you? That's a sign that you want to go to a more structured game. If you're at Milsim West and you're like, well, why have I been at this patrol base for an hour? Like, I haven't seen gunfights in an hour. Why can't I get more BBs and go out there? Maybe you want something that's less structured. And no matter what you want, that's totally okay. But like, if you're asking those questions a lot, I feel like that's a good indicator that you might not be at the right event promoter for what you're specifically looking for.
Yeah, and also like something else that I think like players get caught up in with Airsoft is some players expect every game to be built to maximize the Airsoft portion. Like we get a lot of flack. One of the main criticisms I get for like the Gun Gamers Productions rule set is the fact that we use 2/8 as our standard BB. Because a lot of players who are like very experienced with the sandbox style of games, all you ever get rewarded for is having heavier BBs at as close to the jewel limit as possible and like really trying to push your gun's performance, because most games are designed for that to be the reward. But then you go to games with issued ammo, and we're not the only ones who aren't giving you 4/8 for issued ammo. Tarkov doesn't have 4/8 available, for example. But players then are thinking, oh, well, now my ability to play has been hamstrung. Because again, it's that priority of my gun should shoot as good as it can shoot, because that's the type of game that's the type of gameplay that's always been rewarded at all the types of games I go to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's understanding that totally different design philosophy of, well, now a promoter might want all of your guns to be balanced within a certain level because they want stock guns to be able to compete with tuned guns. And it's a totally different way of looking at the game that is, not better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah, like I think like I understand the design philosophy, between issued ammo and non-issued ammo. It presents a different type of game. The last Milsim West that I went to, which was Balcar, I went with my GHK AK with a totally stock hop-up, The issue is the hop-up that comes in a GHK overhops pretty much anything that isn't a 3.2. And if you've been to Milsim West before, 3.2s are rare. And not only are you limited by the reduced firepower of a gas blowback compared to an AEG, you're also not nearly as cool as the dude with blank fire who's right next to you. So I feel like gas blowbacks lose a lot of their like, oh, that's so cool at Milsim West. But to get back to game design, something I really didn't enjoy about that game, which is no fault of the staff at all, it was my decision to bring a gas gun, is that I feel like I couldn't take advantage of the issued ammo because they'd be like, hey, I have an entire bottle of 2.8s or even 2.5s. And they'd be like, well, those aren't going to work with my rifle. So I felt like, I think I fired maybe 170 shots the entire game. Like I didn't go through my entire combat load ever. And I feel like that really took away from enjoying the game. And if you're not prepared to go to a game that has issued ammo with a gun that can reliably hop issued ammo, it's not going to make your experience any better. And if anything, it's going to make you, I don't want to use the word bitter, but a little disappointed, because I feel like the experience would have been much better if the GHK just hopped 2.8s perfectly fine.
Yeah. And that's why, like, one of the things that I, when I'm recommending a gun, one of the things I always try to mention is what BBs it can hop, because not everybody is using the same BBs, or not everyone's going to games with the same BBs available. But actually, there's a couple of really good points in the chat I want to address. Alistair asked, do you like LARP to be put into Milsim too? And Alistair, here's the problem with you asking me that. I am a card-carrying absolute LARP dork. So if you're asking me if I want my Milsim games to incorporate as much LARP as possible, I'm going to point you to the fact that I go to Milsim West Insurgency games specifically not to bring a gun and to just mess around and make people laugh for 40 hours.
On the other end of the spectrum, during check-in at Balcar from Milsom West, my squad leader goes, "Why are we here?" And I said, "Because I bought a ticket." like once I got into the game, I got into the LARP of like we're fighting Rust 4 or NATO. But like I think it absolutely can play into it. But again, it's one of those things where like Airsoft is just a tool to have fun. Like you can have whatever you want. And I see another comment that I want to bring up from Caslab Airsoft, saying that he's the worst type of player because he's a content creator. I feel like that's not the worst thing in the world. As somebody who used to do gameplay on their channel, I gave it up because I felt like it was detracting from me actually enjoying Airsoft. Like I was personally too stressed out about making a good video to, enjoy the game. And now that I don't make videos, I feel like I can enjoy the game more. But I feel like focusing on getting good content can't go along with playing with the spirit of the game, whatever it is, whether you're at the more structured,
It depends on
more
the game.
LARPy. I think there's absolutely games where that can still play in. I think it ultimately comes down to like how you handle the situation as a player, because to kind of like to look at it from a content creator perspective, like if you look at it from our perspective, I could definitely see like a more LARPy game where you don't actually shoot anybody be a very entertaining video.
I mean, we have the Azeri survival simulations video on our channel.
And like I feel like a lot of what Kristen Balahack doesn't involve a ton of shooting. And sure, there are people who want to watch Airsoft games, to watch somebody go to a huge game and power game it and get like a huge kill streak, like that will get you views. There's channels that have wholly built themselves around that. Like Novrich is very much you're watching people get taken out in Airsoft. But I think
I'm going to name drop a friend of mine here, but who is absolutely like the quintessential example of like a power game YouTuber is Alphonse.
I knew you were going to say that. I feel like
I'm right.
yeah. I feel like there's still a market for content either way. Like, and honestly, I feel like if you got good at storytelling at games you don't use your gun very often, that's untapped as a creator, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's important to also know, what kind of player you are. And one of the things I really like bringing up, this gets into my esoteric. So for reference, I was an English literature major in college, and I had a specialty in communications, rhetoric, and media studies as well, which has actually been useful doing marketing in my day job. But point aside, there's 4 types of gamers. Is generally something that's agreed upon within media studies. I forget the name of the guy who pioneered this, but you've got your killers. These are the guys who want to go out and they want to play the game and win at the competition of winning the game. They want to explore all the ways to basically just kill other players.
Call of Duty campaign.
Yeah. Call of Duty multiplayer is like killers, okay? You got your socializers. These are the guys who want to hop into World of Warcraft, build a party, and go complete a dungeon raid, mostly for the fun of doing it with their friends.
Yeah.
You've got your explorers. These are your nerds who beat the Mass Effect trilogy in triple the time it should take because they want to visit every single planet and make sure that they've talked to all the cool aliens. That's me.
Yeah. Same. Like,
and then you've got your achievers. These are the guys who want to go out and really figure out all the ways that the game can be, changed, and figure out the ways that they can achieve the most out of it. 100% completionists, achievement hunters. So you've got your killers, your socializers, your achievers, your explorers. That does not change just because you're playing airsoft.
It's
There's
still a game.
still those people who want those things out of it. And you need to identify which of those you are to understand what experience you're looking for.
Absolutely. Like just because we are somewhat restrained in airsoft in the sense of like you can't do some of the things you do in video games in airsoft because physics and morality. But there's still different ways that people have fun and kind of because a lot of people equate airsoft with video games, more specifically like first person shooters. Like I got into airsoft because the original Modern Warfare 2 was so cool. And I was like, I can do that in real life. Awesome. And back then, I feel like a lot of airsoft manufacturers kind of played into like, we need to make the meta gun from whatever this year's Call of Duty was. And that's how we ended up with like the JGS system, the old school A&K like Masada, ACRs, the Honey Badger when Ghost came out, like all of that stuff. Like back then, every year, the new airsoft gun was whatever was popular in the last Call of Duty. And I feel like a lot of airsoft games still draw inspiration from first person shooters. Maybe not as much anymore, but definitely like I feel like in terms of like military simulations that could be equated to an airsoft, I feel like games have been more of an inspiration than movies in the last 10 years because there hasn't really been a great like war movie that you could base airsoft off of, but there's been plenty of opportunities for video games. And I feel like one of the best examples is at Action Sports Wisconsin, the Tarkov games.
Oh my God. I actually really liked that game, by the way. So I went to Tarkov, right? And one of the things that I think Tarkov highlights is a way that you can design a game to also accommodate multiple types of players. Because players who really wanted to because there was the raffle tickets is ultimately what was being looted for. So players who want to feel like they achieved something could compile a bunch of raffle tickets, or they could kill a bunch of people. And then you've got like, oh yeah, I've got my killers, right? Like they're out here, they're trying to kill a bunch of people, be raiders, stockpile resources and see what they can do. And then you've got your achievers who are like, I got this many raffle tickets or completed this many quests. Then you've got your absolute fucking socializing dorks like me who are like, well, I don't really need anything from the raffle, so I'm just going to go LARP as a drunk who randomly helps people.
You're the beggar on the streets that if you give them like 5 gold, they tell you like the secret route to get around.
I literally just started getting raffle tickets because I would just help people complete quests. And so I would just get raffle tickets for helping people, and I would just give people raffle tickets for fake vodka shots. Because I don't care. I don't need anything.
No.
I've got all my stuff I need.
What's my third Elite Force 1911 tack going to do for me? What is that? But I think it's nice to have those games that reward those different styles. But at the same time, there's games there's brands rather that have built themselves around. We are for the killers. I think American Milsim or Lion Claws are great at that. Where you're there to play a big game of airsoft. That really rewards those players. Excuse me. There's games that reward all 4 of those different types. It really and again, it comes down to if you're a company hosting airsoft events, highlight what makes you different. Please, it's going to make your customers less confused, and it's ultimately going to lead to more players coming to your games.
Yeah, and it's just going to keep growing the game, right? And it's going to help with player retention. So, I don't know. We've been going for about an hour now. I feel like we could go on about this for 12 hours.
Forever.
But the problem is that, ultimately we have to wrap up at some point. So I actually want to close on a thought inspired by 6mm Mandalorian's most recent comment, where he says, I think one of the main reasons we don't see as much LARP airsoft videos is that they are a lot harder to compile a good story editing. Also, Cast Lab just made me laugh. I'm sorry. It's not fair. You got all the cool shit in North America. Man, Cast Lab, you're right. It's not fair. But counterpoint, you live in the UK, and that means you're not paying tariffs for Scotch whiskey. So it's all fair in the end.
Don't know if Cast Lab's in the UK specifically.
I think he is. Or is he in the EU? Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
But I feel like whenever you see like the games where on the surface, like you see helicopters and stuff, we don't have that as much. Like where the military gets involved with the game, we don't have that. So that's the cool thing that you have. I feel like something that would be great for like LARP on yeah, like LARP Airsoft on YouTube is several years ago. Markiplier did like a choose your own adventure series where he uploaded like
Oh, Cast Labs in Denmark specifically.
okay, so
Denmark's cool too.
yeah. Uploaded like 50 videos at once, and the way that it worked is like at the end you had a choice, and picking like option A or option B was with like the YouTube calls them like cards at the end,
Mhm.
and it would like if you want to go choose option A, you watch this video. If you watch option B, you watch this video, and then it just continues that story. Admittedly, I don't think anyone else can make that work. Like that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a
Markiplier
lot.
kind of has a lot of money and a lot of experience.
The only thing that I could think of to make that work on a smaller scale would be like, we'll go to this time in the video. But how much would that suck to do as a viewer, especially if you're watching on your phone, which is where most of YouTube's watch time comes from nowadays?
Well, the point I actually wanted to make as well, but one of the things that I think 6mm Mandalorian did touch on that I really wanted to talk about is that this stuff is hard to get a good story via editing and hard, but it is fun to watch.
Yes.
But my point that I want to talk about is the fact that sometimes you just can't watch something.
No, you have to experience it.
Airsoft to me is a big frontier for experiential play. And I think that is something that demand is growing for. I think the explosion of D&D and tabletop gaming in the last few years, I think the explosion of video games, I think the explosion of immersive RPG experiences, and the explosion of Airsoft, I think is all it's very indicative of a total radical change in priority when it comes to entertainment. Because for a long time, entertainment has been, I want to passively watch this thing. And now we're seeing more and more and more. I want to stay engaged as I continue to play with this thing.
Yeah, you want to experience it at the end of the day. Like it's not just I'm going to sit here and watch Blade Runner, like whatever movie it may be. You want to experience it. And, there's different ways to experience hobbies, whether it be like, I'm going to play through the story of an Elder Scrolls game, or I'm going to go out to the airsoft field and truly, because you're not limited by the limitations of a video game, I'm going to make this day what I want it to be within the limitations that are set up by the event promoter. And I think that's awesome that we have that ability to do that with Airsoft and not necessarily have the focus of the day beyond the gunfighting or the Airsoft replica itself. Having this other ways to just go out and have fun, that's incredibly important to have.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, is really inspired, like, a lot of my game design philosophy, a lot of the way I look at games, like my favorite video games, for example, right? I love survival horror games. Like ever since I played Resident Evil 4 in 2005 when it came to PS2, that changed my fucking life. But so, you've got all these different intentions, all these different ideas, all these different ways to play that exist. And I think they're all cool. And I want to see more people commit to their ideas and commit enough and have the resources to commit that we see even more different ways to play the game. Like to my mind, outside of like traditional military simulation, game design mentality, you don't have that many event promoters doing a whole lot in the space. You have like your Survive Omegas, your Grimneers, Gun Gamers Productions. We have some ideas that are going to step further and further outside of that realm. But you have like not that many promoters who are trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's a mistake. I want to see more promoters get fucking weird.
Yeah, and like, while they're not my cup of tea, I'm always happy to see people come out with airsoft guns. They don't really look like guns. Like, Wolverine is starting to come out with a lot of stuff that's appealing more towards that speed soft market, where it's like having the HBA tank itself come out of the pistol grip of it. You have, I don't remember what it's called, but Amped Airsoft sells like a completely 3D printed body for HPA.
Yep.
That honestly looks more like a Titman 98 than anything you'd ever see in like an actual firearm. And I think that by like just realizing that if we categorize Airsoft as a gearbox that propels BBs and the outside can be whatever we want it to be, we're going to see Airsoft grow as a hobby and get into more weird, different stuff besides like loosely military themed. And that's great for getting people into the hobby who may not want it to be military themed, just want it to be a competition. Like there's so many people in paintball that would never think about putting a camouflage uniform on ever.
Or think about the number of people who go to Ren fairs, the number of people
Yeah.
who go to cons, the number of people who do cosplay. There's a big market for a game like Airsoft within those types of scenes. But those people don't want to dress up in military costumes. And to my mind, rather than dilute the military games with people who don't want to play military games, run the non-military games.
And you know, not being a part of that group of people, I hope this makes sense to say, but like, could you imagine if you're somebody who's used to doing LARP and you can only like hit each other with rubber swords? Imagine now having the opportunity to also have firearms in that, in whatever context it is, whether you're like a Renaissance LARPer and now you have like flintlock pistols that HFC makes, or like if you're doing post-apocalyptic stuff and all of a sudden you can have firearms in that, not just like knives and stuff like that. That's not only going to help our hobby and help us as airsofters, it's also going to help them have a better experience as well. And seeing those two groups kind of come together in kind of in a melting pot and create something between the two of them, I think is only going to help the hobby. You know, they may have other interests, like while they may like Renaissance fairs, they might also really love Arma and give a more structured airsoft event a try. And I think it only helps everybody.
I have a secret to tell you guys. Okay, ready? So the Venn diagram between people who really enjoy Milsim and people who really enjoy shit like Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons,
It's a circle.
it's a circle.
It's a circle. It's a circle, but like each group is too afraid to like get bullied for liking the other side of it. But like as soon as you accept that we are all nerds, and no matter what hobby you're trying to explain to a normal person, you're going to feel uncomfortable, then it opens up so many opportunities for you to find other stuff that you like.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think to bring it to a point, like to kind of also random guy Kev is telling us to show us feet, show us your feet, random guy Kev. And random guy Kev says, why Airsoft is Airsoft, why labels? Well, we just spent like an hour talking about why labels matter.
I mean, like, I feel like labels in a sense are important to find the right flavor of Airsoft that you like, but they shouldn't be a restriction at all.
Yeah, that is my thing. You know, I'm a big fan of like, you know, Albert Camus and absurdist philosophy, if we have any enlightened souls watching. But, you know, the biggest thing is you have to embrace the absurd. You have to understand that everything we're doing in this gaming context is fucking stupid.
Like, you're never going to be able to get your parents to get it. You're never going to be able to get your coworkers to get it unless they're also into it. Just embrace that you're a dork. It's going to make it so much more enjoyable for you.
But yeah, so, you know, if you've got like certain types of the game that you like to play better than others, then yeah, play those types of the game you like to play better than others. But if you are, you know, just a nerd who likes different things depending on the day, give it all a shot, because honestly, all of it can be fun as long as you embrace the absurd and let go of expectations. Let go of your expectations, your preconceived notions of this is supposed to be this. Relax. Embrace the experience. Accept that you might lose. Believe it or not, losing can also be fun, and losing is part of the experience.
Absolutely. When you're the platoon leader that has like 15 people who's taking a dead photo with them, sometimes that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, just like nothing is more fun to me than going to a new event promoter. And like, besides like the stuff so I don't break the rules or die, not really understanding, like going into it with such an open mind. I feel like I've run out of experiencing that because I've just been to so many event promoters at this point. But trying something new in airsoft that's refreshing is an amazing feeling to have.
Yeah, so it's yeah, and as 6 people Mandalorian says, fire a tagging round off your wrist and try not to smile.
And like I'm not super into Star Wars personally, but I can never do that in Millicent West, and that sounds really cool.
I actually was supposed to go to that Galactic Civil War game at Action Sports, but I had a wedding come up, and but like my number one rule is I don't miss weddings for airsoft. I'm like I can't bring myself to be that big of a dork.
Okay, but you didn't fire a tagging off your wrist at the wedding, I hope.
You know what? That's true. I didn't fire a tagging off my wrist at the wedding. I did mosh a little bit at the wedding because the groom is also into metal, so that was cool. But
Poor bride.
it was for like 30 seconds before they decided Eric's gonna hurt somebody. We have to turn this off. But I don't know. We've been going for a while now. Should we take a few questions if people have questions?
I don't know a good point to end on, so we're gonna have to take some questions.
Yeah, the thing that's the problem is you and I get together and we could just talk forever. Does the mic even need to be close to him for you to hear me? I'm so loud.
So if you guys have like any like general airsoft questions, preferably stuff that we just talked about, we'll take them. Otherwise, we're just gonna continue laughing at how absurd our hobby is.
Oh yeah, no. Airsoft is objectively, by any measure, the stupidest hobby ever.
And leaning into that only makes it so much more fun. Like recognizing that like I have stuff to pretend to be not only an American soldier, which I feel like is almost better because I'm an American. I can pretend to be soldiers from other countries, which is way weirder than I spent. But then on the other side, also in my garage, in that pile of stuff that my girlfriend absolutely hates, I have everything to be a post-apocalyptic mailman as well. Like having the reach to go to a variety of different airsoft games makes the hobby more fun. And like I feel like I love my airsoft guns that I have. I love my Stoner 63. I love my SOP Mod M4 by VFC. I also love going to games with my KWC 1911 and nothing else. And I feel like by embracing what variety airsoft can provide, I feel like you're going to have a lot more fun with it.
And that's the big thing for me, right? Like I do not enjoy the hobby the same way now as I did when I got into it almost 20 years ago.
Oh man. Yeah, no, like, well, and like I feel like this could be a whole nother conversation that takes an hour, but the progression of a player, because I feel like I got into airsoft for kind of power gaming. I wanted it to be like Call of Duty, and then I wanted it to be like Battlefield, and now I want it to be like Fallout New Vegas. Like I feel like that's a progression in character building.
So it's weird, right? Because the way I started, even from like my earliest days of playing airsoft, I was still trying to do like scenario game design. Like we needed, like I was the guy who was like, let's do a hostage game. And then everybody else is like, oh, well, I don't want to play the hostage. But like, I'll fucking play the hostage.
Yeah.
I don't care. It sounds awesome. so I guess like I was always kind of like in that weird, like I would be the guy, like one of my friends took one of those spring-loaded claymores and put it on my chest with the idea being that like if the rescue team got up to me, they could set it off and, you know, get them. And I like had my hands behind my back. This was so not legit. This was at like my friend's backyard property that he had trenches dug out in. But I had my hands like taped behind my back and I used my teeth to pull the little cord out of the claymore so he couldn't set it off.
Oh my God. You know, that's not an experience you're going to get at Milsom West. That's going to be something you see in like Milsom West Haters Ball. But but you know, that just goes to show how versatile the hobby of toy guns can be, that you can do anything with them. And I feel like by also like maybe just because this is what I want to see more of in Airsoft, if we have more weird Airsoft games or like period games, more people are going to make those replicas. And that's what I want to see. I am sick of M-Lock M4s. Bring me, maybe not a Thompson because I don't personally like those. Bring me an old gun with a state of the art gearbox, and I will love you. Get somebody at any airsoft manufacturer, give me a Mac 10 or a Mac 11 with a decent gearbox or a gas blowback system that doesn't shoot 50 feet hotter than any field will ever allow me to go to.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get my money. Like, it's going to automatically come out of my credit card, like my bill to pay the electricity in my house. Like, it's going to be mandatory that I have to own it. But like, and this is a whole different discussion, I wish that weird guns could actually go to fields.
Yeah. And that's, I think, also like relevant to the history of Airsoft, right? Like, where so many Airsoft guns were built for the model gun hobby. They were never meant to be shot at other people. They were meant to be like functional, but that's secondary thought. Like, I have a KWC Uzi that I bought on a whim. That thing shoots way too hot to be used anywhere. So I have to get like a 3D printed nozzle restrictor that's going to be able to let me use it at any game.
First off, incredible the amount of like talent that we have in Airsoft. Somebody's like, oh, well, I can't use my weird thing. I'm just going to 3D print a restrictor so I can use it. And like, we see that all over in Airsoft. Like, I just paid way too much money for a kit to make my Stoner 63 like 8 inches shorter. Half of it's 3D printed. Some of it's like custom made with carbon fiber. We just have so many talented people in Airsoft. Now let's let the manufacturers do some of that work. Like, I'm grateful that like every day people are doing it. The manufacturers need to make it workable for Airsoft.
Even better. Revolt against the manufacturers. Reject big Airsoft. Support the 3D printers and the artisans who actually make the shit you want.
Oh, and again, a topic for a whole nother live stream. The difference in Airsoft culture, like we've been talking about this as two people who have only played Airsoft in America.
Yep.
The difference in cultures between different countries, because we're like, oh yeah, you can't bring a 400 FPS Uzi to the field. You go to some Airsoft fields in South Asia and they're like, you're only shooting 450. And they're also like, why are you measuring in feet per second, you fucking American?
Yeah. Meanwhile, use joules like a civilized person. So, all right, I am going to say, do we have any questions or let's see if we've got any comments that are worth highlighting. Okay. You know what? This might be a good one to end on. I'm just going to go ahead and show this comment. Cast Lab Airsoft. I think the most important thing for me in Airsoft is there is room for all on the field. The speed softers, milsimmers, LARPers, the social people. It's a very fun mix of very different people. And I could not agree more because
Absolutely.
I have met a wider variety of people at all these different games than I've met anywhere else in my life.
Absolutely. And like, there's always the joke of like, go and touch grass. But I feel like part of that is you also need to socialize with people who are different than you. Like, that's just good for you being a better person, is meeting people who are different than you. And Airsoft is this experience where you just get to meet, weirdos like yourself and get to see the world from different viewpoints. And that kind of reflects into how they do some of the more LARPy stuff, or if you're just at a game talking to people because they're cool. Like, that's just better for you as a person all around, to meet people who are different than you. And Airsoft really provides that experience to meet people from all different walks of life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna end with an example from Milsim West. Actually, one of my favorite like groups of people that I've met is like the Milsim West cadre, because all of them are united in like, hey, we all like work with this promoter. The majority of them have some level of military experience. I'm one of the ones who doesn't. So then I have to, no, I don't have to, that's the wrong word. I get to listen to all these people talk about these crazy ass military stories. That's a totally separate world from me. Like, I've never been in Ranger Battalion, and I'm hearing Josh, Sean, and Nick talk about like all this crazy shit. And I'm like, wow, okay. But then we connect on all these other levels about all this other nerd stuff. And that's super fucking cool. Like it just reminds you how someone could have been on a totally different life trajectory, come from a totally different place, but then you agree on these few like core things and build from there and make really cool friends.
Yeah, and like even like outside of cadre, to use Milson West as another example, like you already have the thing in common that you're a nerd that likes to dress up like you're in the military. So like you already know that they're probably a cool dude. But just meeting like at the last Milson West, I met somebody like I've lived in suburbs my entire life. Meeting somebody who grew up in like a major city was just like a very eye-opening thing. And like they've just had different life experiences. And I'm like, that's wild that that's your everyday compared to what I take. I'm like, you take a train to work? What is that? What I don't believe you. That can't be in my country. But like it's just airsoft is a great way to just go out and make friends. And like I think it's just a great thing, not only in terms of like airsoft, but also for just you as a person and having that mutual bond of like, you know, we're nerds that go to this indoor field and play 5v5s, or we're nerds who pay $200 to go angry camp in the woods for the weekend. Like that's just a great stepping off point to building friends.
Yeah. So if nothing else, I hope the message from today's live stream is have fun, talk to people, play, like learn what you want out of the game and be honest with what you want out of the game because it's all okay. And then go to the games that you like and talk to other people who maybe like different things or like similar things. And you might learn that you have things in common or not in common. And it's all just fun. That's the point, right? At the end of the day, it's all just about fun. This is an experiential hobby where we go out and we make memories because, you know, if you have nothing else, all you've got are the experiences you had. Make them cool.
Exactly. And, you know, like, let's say you go to a game and it's not quite what you were expecting. You already paid for the ticket. You're not getting your money back. Lean into it. You know, you may not think it's something you like, but then it is. I think the big example is when Survival Mega started. I didn't think it was going to be for me.
Yeah.
And God, I love that. And you know, nothing made me happier than going into it being uncertain and leaving being like, well, this is what I'm going to do for the next one. Like, I had a dead set plan on what I was going to do for that next game. And that's like one of the greatest experiences that I can have. So like, even if you're trying something new, which is just good in life in general, if it's maybe not what you're expecting, lean into it. You might enjoy it even though you think you didn't or you weren't going to.
Yeah. So I think that's oh my God, Cast Lab. I'm not gonna read it, but I'm gonna show it. I don't know. There's not a way I can read this that doesn't sound like aggressively sexual.
No, you're also a content creator, so you know that YouTube just loves to like slap stuff like that. So we're not gonna read.
Oh, they love to slap their yellow limited monetization balls.
Oh man. Thank you, Susan.
Well, hey, Susan's not the CEO anymore.
No,
we can't blame Susan.
no.
I don't know the
Now,
new guy's
now
name.
it's the NFT guy that runs YouTube.
That's so much worse.
Somehow even worse.
All right. Well,
I think that's a good play. I think we were derailed enough.
yeah, I think we're getting to the point where if we kept going, it's just gonna be derailed. Which, you know, stay tuned for the Gun Gamers After Dark live stream at some point. I don't know. Maybe we'll just do that where we just get way too hammered and talk all kinds of nonsense. But if you were watching this live stream, thank you very much for watching. I've been Eric,
and my name's Lane.
We've been the BB Gamers.
The corporate merger didn't go so well.
Yeah. For reference, we were literally like making this streaming event in my living room an hour and a half before we went live. And I just made a joke of, hey, you know, what should we call this? And I just put the BB Gamers, and that's what's sticking. So
that's literally just how it went. And no other thought was put into it. And now we're here.
And this was a very fun stream, I think. So thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for engaging. And thank you for just, I don't know, being chill and having a good time with us, because I had fun.
Yeah, and for anybody who's watching the live stream after it aired, thank you so much for your continued support of the channels.
So yeah, that'll do it. We're gonna
That's
end the
right.
stream. I'm gonna do it. Ready? Are you ready? I'm gonna do it.
Are you
My
prepared?
hand is on the button. Oh god. Ah! Oh, wait. Ah!